Hello there. Ron Callis here with another episode of Automation Unplugged. Today is Wednesday, February 5th. It's just a little bit after 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, coming to you here from Florida. And as always, Automation Unplugged is brought to you by my day job over at One Firefly and all the fine people that make up the One Firefly team. I am going to jump over here onto Facebook just to make sure technology is behaving and that, in fact, we are live streaming. I'm also super excited today. Hopefully, you guys will have to tell me if you hear a difference. I've got my new technology. I've got my new microphone and my new rig here. I was kind of getting tired of maybe some of the terrible audio that well, in my opinion, I knew that there was room for improvement. So we decided to go ahead and make some steps and up our game. So I've got my new Shure SM7B microphone, also known as the Joe Rogan microphone, and some other technology in the mix. So you guys will have to give us some feedback, drop some notes, tell me if it sounds any different or better, or God forbid, worse than any of our previous shows. So this is show number 97. And my guest today is Pete Baker. And Pete Baker is an industry veteran. He's been around the block for a long time. I've known Pete for probably close to 20 years. It's hard to believe. I think he will agree to that. And but here we are. And Pete is doing some super exciting things, growing brands, and helping represent manufacturers around the world. And he's going to tell us about some of those exciting adventures he's been on. But without further ado, let me go ahead and bring in Mr. Pete Baker. So let's see if we can get technology to behave. There he is.
All
Pete,
right.
How are you?
Hey, pretty good, Ron. Thanks for having me today, and hello to everybody in your audience. Really delighted to be here. And yeah, it is hard to believe it's been 20 years, Ron. We met each other when I had an integration company, as you may remember, and I think you were with Lutron.
That's right. We're going in the Wayback Machine. And then
right.
It's funny. We just keep crossing paths in random places around the world. We'll run into each other at ISE in Europe, or I remember you reminded me when you and I saw each other in Vegas a few weeks ago that we had crossed paths randomly at crossing streets, or as I was exiting a hotel in Nassau, Bahamas.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
And I'm like, Pete, what are you doing here? You're like, Ron, what are you doing here?
Yeah, I'm from there. As you may remember, I was born in the Bahamas. And
yeah, that's right.
So I go back there quite a bit. I actually have dual citizenship. So I still go back there. We have a little family store, A. Baker and Sons. So
yes.
Anyone in the audience is ever in the Bahamas, that's our little store right on Main Street in Nassau. My grandfather started it in 1897, I believe.
And what sort of goods and services are sold at this store?
Well, so my father was a barrister, so they sell some of the regalia that they wear when they go to trial for lawyers, but also just kids' clothes and little touristy kind of things in the shop. So
sure.
Yeah, it's a cool little store we're pretty proud of.
That's awesome. And you're still involved in the management of that store, is that?
Well, a little bit. My cousins and I and my aunts definitely still get involved in that store. And then we have a couple shops next to that as well.
Okay. So my audience, those listening, both watching live and those that are listening to the podcast, now that we are out as a podcast, they may not know you like I know you. So as always, I'd love for you to get us introduced to kind of your background in the consumer electronics industry, the integration and audio video space. You have done some super interesting things over the years. So I'd love for you to give us a little bit of that background.
Yeah, thank you. So I started in the consumer electronics industry right out of high school. So I had a friend of mine who was working at Dayton Hudson, or now it's known as Macy's, in the U.S. In case we have any international customers. It's a department store, and they used to have an electronics department. And so this person who's still involved in the industry, Andy Wardine, most recently with Dyn Audio, he was working there, and he would have customers that came in and said, "I'd like to get this surround sound system, but I need someone to hook it up." And they didn't offer those installation services. Nobody did. This is back in 1985. And so Andy and I would put the systems together for his customers that would come into the retail store because they just didn't have any other way to do that. And the customer would say, I need somebody to hook it up because I don't know how to do this stuff. And Andy eventually left and started a company, Advanced Entertainment Systems, I believe it's called, or was called. And so I eventually went to work for him. And I remember, and that company was later sold to J.J. Vanderson, which now is part of the Bravis group that you're hearing a lot of press about. So I worked for J.J. Vanderson for a little while. And I remember just kind of pinching myself thinking, I can't believe I actually get paid to do this, sell all this cool equipment. And I just absolutely loved it. And so I later went on from there. I worked for a couple different integration companies and then eventually started my own integration company called Custom Home Integration. And I launched that company and eventually built it up and sold it, and went to work at RTI as a VP of Sales and Marketing at RTI for 12 years. So at RTI, I led all of the sales, marketing, tech support, training, product integration, a lot of those different teams for 12 years, and just had, a really great team that I worked with there, and we accomplished a lot of great things. And in 2014, I decided to leave and start my own company, Baker International Group. And really the impetus for that is when I started at RTI, they really didn't have any international presence whatsoever. And I had a great U.S. sales team, but I focused mostly on expanding their global footprint and developing the business outside of the United States, really. And now those products are sold in over 120 different countries. And so I not only did the sales management, but I also did a lot of the training internationally because I really like to do that. I like the training. I'm also really wired for marketing. I love the marketing aspects and thinking about what kind of makes people tick. What would motivate a buyer to want to use brand X, Y, or Z or product X, Y, Z in their home or in their projects? And so I felt that there was other companies, let's say in the U.S., that were really strong in the U.S. but hadn't yet expanded internationally or needed some help expanding internationally, not just with sales representation, but also marketing and training and other elements that support that sales process. And so I started Baker International Group in 2014. Now it's hard to believe it's 5 years later and going strong. So you can certainly visit thebigcorp.com to find out more about my company and what we do here. But that's a little background. So I'm really spent 20 years as an integrator and a licensed low voltage technician and contractor, and then went on to work for a manufacturer, and now several manufacturers since RTI that I represent.
Awesome history and trajectory there from, operating in some local integration firms, kind of stepping up the ladder and taking on maybe more risk and more reward and
yeah, definitely a lot of risk in there.
A lot of entrepreneurship.
Well, starting a couple of companies, you know what that's like, Ron. It's definitely a nail biter.
It's wrought with tremendous challenges, and either you're gonna grow and grow. You're going to grow personally, and you're going to grow that business, or it's not going to go so well, because
Right.
rarely do
Well,
we enter that having all the skills we need to ultimately be successful.
there's never really a good time. And I remember when I started my integration company, my wife was due with our second baby, and she said, "Please don't do this. Please don't do this. We need your income." And I said, I understand that you're nervous about this, but if I don't do it, it's going to eat at me the rest of my life. And so I did it, obviously, and it was extremely successful. Our revenues doubled every single year up until the day that I sold the company. So,
Wow.
To those of you out there that are thinking about starting a business, there's never a good time, and fear is a good motivator. When you're thinking, I can't fail because my family is depending on me, that's a powerful motivator. So, I've done it a couple times. And
if you accept that failure is not an option, then if you're having hard times, it just means you're not done yet, because you just got to
right.
work through it,
Yeah.
or you
Yeah.
can quit, just never quit today, quit tomorrow. And then when
Yeah.
tomorrow comes, say,
That's a
great, I
really
won't,
good idea.
I'm going to quit, but it's just not today. I'll quit tomorrow.
That's good.
And then
You'd
it
be a
never
good
comes.
Navy SEAL motivator, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to put up on the screen, you just gave us your corporate website. So I'm going to just drop that on the screen.
Great. Thank
If
you.
anyone wants to check that out. Again, for my listeners, that is thebigcorp.com, the Big Corp. And what are folks that go to your website, what are they going to find on your site? What sort
Well,
of
one of the
products or
things that
services
they'll
are you
find,
offering?
yeah, one of the things that they'll find on the website that's a great resource is something that was developed by One Firefly, and that would be videos on the Savant user experience. So I have a full section on my website under resources that demonstrates the user experience that you can enjoy with Savant. I also have industry resources on there as well, which are a lot of really great links and resources for anyone in the industry, whether it's industry publications around the world, other resources like links to ISE or CEDIA, of course. And then I also publish a lot of articles. So I write articles regularly for industry publications all around the world. Connected Home Magazine in Australia and New Zealand, and Essential Install in the UK, and CEDIA, CE Pro in the US. And so after I've published those articles, or after they've published those articles, I do take those articles and post them on my website. So all of the articles are up there. They're free to download and review. I have just recently recorded a lot of videos that I'll also be posting on the website as well. So yeah, I would encourage you to visit the website. There are some great resources there. And you can also contact me, through the website or just at pete@thebigcorp.com. You can reach me there directly as well.
Awesome. Pete, we have someone that's made a comment. So Mackenzie has said, welcome, Pete. So good to have you on the show. Also cool about that shop. I think she's talking about your shop in the
Great.
Bahamas.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Thanks, Mackenzie.
And if you are out there, folks, watching us live, don't forget to drop a comment in. Tell us where you're coming to us from, or if you have questions for Pete. So, Pete, I have first of all, I want to peel back the layers in terms of transitioning from an integration business and having successfully sold that business. Can we talk about that for a little bit? How did you
Sure.
ultimately decide to sell? And then how did you actually sell your business? Like, how did you go about finding a suitor that was interested in purchasing the business?
Yeah, great question. So when I started custom home integration, I really started custom home integration at a time when the previous company I was working at actually went out of business. And I had a couple customers that were halfway through that installation process. And so I started custom integration really to take care of those customers so that they their projects would be completed. And I wanted to do it legitimately, so I went to the State Board of Electricity and got licensed, bonded, and insured, set up a formal business entity. I brought in somebody who could manage the installation process, and that person, and I should also say that I started at RTI about the same time, but RTI was a very, very small company. There were only like 4 people in the company when I started there. And so I did all of the sales, training, tech support, customer service, all of that at RTI when I started there. And wrote all of the copy for the literature and so forth. So I brought in somebody to manage the installation side of the business. And I said, look, I want you to have a vested interest in the business. So over the course of 2 years, I'm going to allow you to earn equity in the business. And so he did. He earned equity over the course of 2 years and became, part owner in the business with me. And when the business at CHI, my integration company, and RTI were doubling every year. And for many years, I was the only salesperson at RTI and the only salesperson at CHI. And I couldn't continue to do both and still have a family. I was working
keep
really
your sanity.
two full-time jobs. And so I came to a crossroads where I really had to pick one or the other. And although I loved the team that I had with CHI, I really had the best team I could ever ask for. They were just phenomenal. They still are fantastic guys that I keep in touch with. I had done that for 20 years, and it was ready for me to make a change. And I liked a lot of the challenges that were afforded to me with RTI. It allowed me to kind of spread my wings with sales, with marketing, with international business, which is what I studied in college. So I made that decision, and at first I of course gave my partner the first right of refusal and said, "Are you interested in buying me out?" And initially he said, "I'm not really sure. I might do something different as well." And so I started. I kind of put together a packet, a presentation packet with financials and the benefits that we had to offer with custom home integration, and showed that to a couple viable candidates, either that were just starting as integration companies or maybe wanted to get into that business, and they were established in other areas like maybe an electrical contractor. And eventually my partner came back and said, I really do want to do this. I want to buy out. And so we put together a program where he paid some money down and then a payout over time, which I thought was fair. I didn't want to put an undue stress on the business. And so if anyone has any questions about how I work the mechanics of that, please feel free to contact me. And I'd be happy to share it with you.
No, that's very generous. I appreciate that, Pete, and I'm sure those listening appreciate that.
Yeah.
In terms of the current business that you're operating, the big corp,
right?
That business in essence is, and I don't want to misstate it, so I'm going to paraphrase and then you correct me and tell my audience exactly what it is. But I'm understanding that you're representing manufacturers. So you're an international representative for various manufacturers, and you might, like, for example, I know you represent Savant in certain international markets, maybe all international markets. You'll clarify that for us. And you also work with other vendors. I'm assuming you might work with some in Australia, some in Europe, some in South Africa, some in the Middle East.
Right.
So, all right, that's what I think I know. Now correct me.
Sure. So when I first started the Big Corp, originally I thought that maybe I would act as like a VP of sales that could be crowdsourced. Okay. And so multiple manufacturers that maybe didn't have the budget to afford a full-time sales and marketing VP of sales and marketing, they could hire me to help in that regard. Uh, and the business model kind of morphed a little bit. Even though I did a full business plan and really did a lot of research and planning going into it, what it evolved into is that I'm primarily a sales rep. And so I'm primarily a sales rep and business development professional that manufacturers contract with me to help them expand their global footprint and also further develop their business internationally outside of the United States. I have helped some companies come into the United States as well because I have a lot of experience in that regard as well. But basically, and then I have also done some projects where I'm a consultant, so I'm not acting as a sales rep for that company. I'm helping that company to develop a business development plan or strategy, and those are pretty intense projects that usually go on a minimum of 3 months and maybe 6 or 12 months in some cases. And so in those regards, I would help them with maybe a market analysis and competitive analysis, and then develop a full comprehensive business strategy. And I often pull in other resources, which you can also see on my website. If you go to thebigcorp.com and look at services, you can see Big Idea Group. So that would be more of the business consulting section of the Big Corp. Now, most of my clients will like to utilize me not just as a sales rep, but they also want some help just in other areas of business development, because I think there's a lot more to sales than just selling. That's just one small aspect of it. You have to support that in order to really achieve great success. You need to have great marketing. You need to have great brand development. You need to have great training and understanding. You need to be able to communicate to your customers what are the benefits to that customer. If you're a customer, Ron, and you want to do business with the Big Corp, I better be able to communicate to you very quickly and effectively what the benefits are to one Firefly and Ron Callis and your audience in working with the Big Corp. And so basically, the benefits with the Big Corp is that you're not just adding sales representation, you're having a whole comprehensive business development strategy to develop your business and increase brand awareness in the markets where I'm representing you. And so that does vary from client to client. You mentioned Savant, and just for clarification, with Savant, I represent Savant in the EMEA region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and also Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. So those are the markets that I work with them. With some other clients like Near, I work with Near and represent them and act as a sales manager, really, and business development manager for Near in all of the markets outside of the United States. And then Russ Sound, another key brand that I work with, I represent them everywhere outside of the Americas. And Nexus 21, for another example, I'm working with them in Europe and Africa. So it varies from brand to brand.
You're putting some serious miles on. I mean, is there a lot of travel involved in this?
Right. Yeah, I definitely go to those markets and travel those markets and meet with dealers in those markets. That's another great benefit of working with the Big Corp, is that I'm feet on the ground for those manufacturers.
I'm gonna just mention kind of a little bit of the origin of One Firefly and the original brand, Firefly
please.
Design Group. When I started the business, I was, as any new business, I wanted business when anywhere in the world someone was willing to hire us, I was willing to go.
Right.
And so there were, early in our career, early in the business, I remember I had an opportunity. Someone expressed a little bit of interest in the Middle East, in Dubai. And I
Yeah.
said, no problem. I'll get on an airplane. I'll fly there. And I flew there the same week. And
Wow.
I went there 24 hours to get there,
Yeah.
24 hours on the ground, and 24 hours to get home.
Ooh, that's painful.
I secured the business, by the way.
You did.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
But I remember that. But one of the comments that the folks that I was meeting with, by the way, you'll know these guys. This was Archimedia back in
Yes.
2008.
Yes, I definitely know them.
And so this was Kareem and team. And but I remember Kareem asking me a question. He goes, Ron, you're in America. You're in the best economy on the planet.
Yeah.
What in the world are you doing over here in the Middle East? And it was actually an interesting point for me, because it gave me the perspective to say, what am I doing? And I just need to be better locally, because there is so much. I mean, there's 10,000 to 15,000, potential clients for me right here in my backyard.
Right.
Why am I flying to these various places? So that's my little bit of exposure to international markets. So I'm curious, you have this really interesting perspective of local markets domestically, what happens here. You're tied into the CEDIA crowd and what's happening in the United States, and I'll say North America, US and Canada. And yet you're working all over the world. So what's different about what's happening in the CI space internationally versus what's happening right here in our backyard? I'd love to hear your perspective.
There definitely are different cultures and different go-to-market strategies, different like idiosyncrasies about different markets and cultures, and also things that you need to adaptations that you need to make for your product to fit in that certain market. A great example maybe with Savant would be KNX integration in the EMEA region. That's something that's very, very important there. Intercom integration in EMEA, well, certainly in markets like London and Australia, it's every single house has intercom and door entry integration, all of them. And we just don't have a whole lot of that. Here, I'm in Minnesota, you're in Florida. There isn't a whole lot of that unless it's like a gated community. We certainly see it there. But honestly, the challenges are I think, much more similar, other than, and then you also have economic and political considerations, definitely. But there's a lot more similarities than there are differences, ironically. And I think that if you just look at the integrators that you're working with, I think that all over the world they're faced with a lot of the same challenges, like, how do I sell this product, which is a premium product, when there are cheaper alternatives that are available direct to the consumer? And so that's something that we're faced with globally. And I think it's something that we really need to look at.
Value, right?
How do you sell value? And I think it's something that is important to talk about on this podcast. I feel like I have a responsibility as a CE industry veteran, and I kind of bang on this drum. Even with CEDIA, I'm a CEDIA certified outreach instructor and CEDIA instructor. So the courses that I deliver, I'm able to provide CEDIA ongoing certification credits for those courses. And so I just think that it's important for all of us in this industry to look at that really, really closely and say, we need to be selling products that deliver value and add more value to our brand and our existence in that project. There's a lot of great interest in smart home technology and home automation and that kind of stuff, which is really, really good. Even at the consumer level and the do-it-yourself level, I think that's great because it bubbles up. Once people start putting in things like Nest thermostats and Ring doorbells and lock sets that you can control with your phone. That's all good. But in order for that to really be integrated into one nice ecosystem and one user interface, you really need the talent and expertise of CEDIA professionals to make that all really sing and make it an enjoyable experience for the homeowner. And so I say that yes, there are cheaper alternatives to brand X, Y, or Z or category X, Y, or Z. And maybe, we talk about little separate systems, which are great, little separate systems that you can set on the kitchen counter. Those are cool. But if you're selling a little separate system that they can buy at the local, electronics store, then why should they hire you? What's the value in having Pete's audio video company work on that project? And so I always tried to find products that were professional grade products that I felt delivered a better experience for the homeowner, either in let's say audio quality or video quality or ease of use. And I would recommend those products and say the reason why I'm recommending this product is because I've been in the industry and I'm a technology expert, and I've been to these trade shows at CES and CEDIA and ISE and so forth, and looked at all the different products that are on the market. And based on my professional opinion, I think that this is the one that's going to deliver the best possible experience for you. And that really goes way beyond price. I think that very often, and I see this worldwide, to answer your question, Ron, I see this worldwide where a lot of, professional integrators, and I fell into this trap as well, that you take the path of least resistance. And so this is the easier thing to sell, but it doesn't necessarily add value. And I always looked at it as I'm going to meet with that customer and I might get one shot. If you're coming in to meet with me at Pete's AV and you're building a home, and I know that you're going to meet with a couple other people, how am I going to grab your attention and make a lasting impact on you where you say, I want to work with Pete? And so I took that very, very seriously. Not initially, because I got maybe a little lazy or arrogant or whatever, and thought, well, everybody should want to work with us because we're, cool. We've got this cool company and cool showroom, and who would not want to work with us? And then next thing I know, I'm trying to get a hold of that prospective client. They're not getting back to me, and then I get the email that says we chose someone else. And so I took it really, really seriously, and I've written articles on this subject, that I would get down on my hands and knees and scrub that showroom and make a bowl of popcorn and, test every bit of equipment, make sure everything is working properly. And even before I had my showroom, I printed up brochures and invested a lot of money in a website so that, fake it till you make it. I wanted to present the best possible image and make us look more, better established than we were in the early stages. And
Did it work?
It did work. Yeah, it did work. Like I said, my revenue doubled every single year till the day I sold it. So yeah, I look at that very seriously and tried to always plant seeds throughout that meeting with that prospective client that would I drop ideas that maybe no one else would talk to them about. Like maybe now I mention high res audio, or I'd mention circadian rhythm, and is that something that you'd like to consider in your home, or wellness, those kind of things. And those are things that we should be talking about.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. Yeah. Is there's a number of super hot topics that are happening, at least here domestically in North America, and that wellness,
Yeah.
One of the components of wellness is circadian rhythm lighting. You have all of your various lighting control brands that are now offering the automation. You have the lighting fixture brands that are giving you the color temperature control. So that's big. There's a lot of noise being made here.
That is big.
Is that big globally? Are they talking about that in South Africa? Are they talking about it in Australia? Are they talking about it in the Middle East?
Well, yes.
Or is it a domestic trend?
No, it's definitely being talked about internationally. I would say, some markets are a little bit ahead of others. Like Australia, those guys seem to be just really into technology and always looking for the next cool thing. So some markets are a little bit quicker to adapt to that than others. There are other things that come into play as well, where you might have, climate control and shading and things like that, or even security, might be more relevant or heightened in some other markets as well compared to others.
We've got an active poster right now.
All right.
So
awesome.
I'm gonna put some of these comments up here on the screen for you.
Okay.
You got Chris out of the UK.
All right.
He says, "Hey, Ron and Pete, great to see another icon on the show." And
great, thanks, Chris.
But then he respectfully disagrees with something you were saying. And but he expounds on it. So he says, unfortunately, and this is Chris Gamble for those listening, unfortunately, our industry is tainted. Too many homeowners have had a bad experience with home tech pros in the past, and they're pulling in the direction of do-it-yourself tech.
Yeah, very good.
How do you bring them back? So I'll leave you with that question. How do you coach your folks around the world that may have had a poor experience with an integrator? How do you bring them back into the fold if maybe they've gone the other direction?
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, Chris, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I do think that it's important to address things like that. There definitely have been a lot of bad examples, and I hear about them all the time. I really have heard about them so many times, from homeowners, from neighbors, friends and family. I mean, I get a lot of those calls. I'm a regular guy just like everybody else, with neighbors and friends and associates that have had a bad experience. So I would answer it this way. Number one, I think that it's very, very important to establish credibility with any prospective new client right from the beginning. So when you have that person come into your showroom, I'll first address it that way, assuming that you're going to have someone come into your showroom that maybe the builder has recommended that they come see you, or the architect or someone like that, and maybe it's a tech savvy person that is inclined to do it themselves or had a bad experience in the past, and maybe they don't want to put technology into their home because they had such a bad experience in the past, and they say, I just want to put separate systems around the house and be done with it. So first of all, what I think you should do is, number one, establish credibility with that customer. What I mean by that is, at my showroom, when I had my integration company, first of all, I spiffed my installers, and I said, when you go out on a job site to finish that project, I would like to get feedback from those customers of ours. And so if you come back to me with any written feedback from any of our customers, good or bad, sorry, I had a Skype call coming in. I thought I shut all my media down, but apparently one slipped through. So I would spiff them to bring back feedback, good or bad. And the bad feedback, of course, I'd reach out to those customers. The good feedback, with their permission, I printed that out and I framed it and I put it right into the greeting area where I would greet guests that would come to our showroom. So I had a couple walls full of accolades from our customers saying how much they loved working with CHI. And I thought that was a pretty cool idea. And I recently shared that story in a presentation I did in Australia. And somebody at the break came up to me and said, you know what? We did something similar, but we took all of those, the feedback, all the recommendations we had from clients and turned it into wallpaper and put it in the bathroom of our showroom. And I thought, that's brilliant. So when someone's a captive audience in the bathroom, they have all they can do is stare at all these glowing reviews about how much they love working with that customer. So that's number one. Number two, I do think that it's important to show that prospective client what that user interface looks like and what that user interface experience is like. And so I would actually hand them that user interface. And in a lot of cases, I'll just use two examples of brands that I work with, Savant and Rustsound. You can download the app and use it as a demo app, and you could tell them to do that as well. And so then if maybe Mr. Homeowner is there and not Mrs. Homeowner, they could download the app and go home and show it to their spouse or significant other or members of the family and show them how intuitive that user interface is going to be. So that's if you get the chance to meet with that customer. Now let's talk about the industry as a whole and your market as a whole. I think that there are ways that you can communicate the value of working with a professional integrator. And I think it's our responsibility as members of CEDIA and members of this industry, either formally a member or informally a member by being in this industry, that we should take a responsibility to promote the importance of working with a professional integrator and having someone like that involved in guiding you through that technology process. Because I absolutely believe with all my heart that no matter how tech savvy that person is, if they have a professional who a technology expert or professional that is putting together that technology in their home, even if it's just a home network and all the devices that now hang on that network, it's going to be a better experience working with a professional integrator than without. And so how I put my words into action is just recently, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I'm a CEDIA certified outreach instructor. And so what that means is I'm certified by CEDIA, and I went through training by CEDIA. I invested my own time and money to get trained by CEDIA to be an authorized CEDIA outreach instructor. And so what that means is I can go into different markets, like Chris, for instance, in the UK. Chris, if you ever want me to help you do some kind of an event for interior decorators or builders, or even your consumer audience, talking about the benefits of using a CEDIA professional, then that's why I did it. I don't get any financial gain directly by doing that. I'm doing it because I want to promote the fact that a consumer working with a CEDIA professional and a CEDIA professional specifying professional grade products in that project is going to be a better overall experience. So
Pete, no, that's a wonderful response, and Chris actually says, Pete, appreciate the response, Pete and Ron. Much love.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and so Chris, you know how to reach me. Feel free to reach me anytime. I'm happy to expand on this one-on-one with you as well.
So we've almost been going for 45, almost 50 minutes here. Believe it or not, you blink and
that's what happens when you get two big talkers together, right?
That is what happens. I do want to close on a topic. I want to get granular around some of your thoughts or feelings around building brand, and this applies to both the big companies, but also the integrator. I say the big companies, so talk about the big vendors, the manufacturers, and whatnot.
Or the
but
big
also
Corp.
Down at the dealer level, what does it mean to build their brand, and why should they do that? What does it make happen easier in their life if in fact they focus on building their brand?
Yeah, so I would sum it up this way. Many years ago, I have a very good friend of mine, Helia Fisher, who used to be the managing director of Yamo US. He brought Yamo speakers to the United States. And he used to tell his team that nobody is standing in line waiting to buy Yamo loudspeakers from you today. You need to give them a reason why they should buy Yamo loudspeakers from you. And so I think about that every day with my business, and I think it's important that you're communicating that as well. That anybody in business is communicating that. And I honestly, I don't think that most companies do a great job with their branding and their marketing the reasons why people should do business with them, and just their branding in general. You know, I'm a marketing guy at heart. One of my clients, Charlie Porritt, says, Pete, you're a marketing professional that makes a living as a sales guy. And so I really love the marketing aspects of it. And just to give you an idea, when I first started with the big corp, you know, I worked really hard on that brand. I was fortunate to get a great domain name and great name, as you were as well, Ron. And when I first started the big corp, although I had been in the industry for, several decades and had a lot of contacts, I didn't have any customers at all, zero customers that I could work with. It wasn't like when I worked for an integration company and then started CHI, I had, kind of a base of consumers that I'd worked with over the years. I didn't have any customers. And so I decided I was going to ISE in January of 2015, and I was trying to promote my company and build my brand. Nobody had heard of the Big Corp. Nobody. And they had heard about Pete Baker, but I didn't want my company to be Pete Baker. It needed to be bigger than that. No pun intended.
I was going to say a nice pun there.
And so I came up with this idea of Think Big, and I printed up some stickers that said Think Big on it. And everybody I went to all kinds of different booths, and I said, listen, I think I could help you with your expanding your business and building your business internationally with sales, marketing, training, and so forth. And if you're open to that, just don't forget to think about me. Think big. And so I gave him a sticker that said Think Big, and I later trademarked that. So I own the trademark for Think Big. And so I invested a lot of time and energy into my branding. I created a really nice brochure initially. I had my website done, and a whole business plan done, right away. So when I launched my company, I left RTI and launched my company. I pretty much was, had my idea in mind, and I had, not to digress too much, but I knew I was going to leave for a couple of years, and I had talked to John, the owner of RTI, about that for a couple of years. So when I finally left, I did have that all ready to go. And same with my integration company. I had a really nice website and brochure and marketing materials done, and I think that it's important for integrators to do that. And you don't have to be an expert at marketing and branding. There are great companies out there that are experts at that. And, honestly, Ron, I would strongly encourage the audience to contact you and your team, because I really have not seen any company out there in our industry that does a better job just as a comprehensive marketing strategy to help integrators further promote their brand and market their brand and market the benefits of why their audience should be working with them. And that kind of goes back to the comment with Chris, that I think the marketing and branding plays a very, very important role in that. I also took project photos with the permission of my clients and posted all of those on our website, and they looked really, really good. And there again, if you have an audience that looks at your website and sees a really amazing theater that they can't do themselves, they really need a professional to help them pull that off. How do you communicate that to your audience? And I think working with a company like One Firefly and having utilizing your services of developing a website and embedding the user experience interface onto the website, that's all great stuff. And those are motivators for those end user customers. They see those videos. I don't have a huge end user customer audience on my website, but if I had an integration company, I would absolutely have your videos on there, because it promotes what a great experience it can be for that consumer if they're using a professionally designed and deployed home automation device, a professional grade home automation device, not something that is an off the shelf do it yourself home automation control device. So does that answer your question?
No, that's and I appreciate the infomercial for One Firefly. I'll pay you $20 when I see you next, maybe at
Well,
CEDIA.
I really truly believe that, and I'm a huge fan of what you and your team do. And I've worked with you personally because I have your videos on my website. If anyone wants to see what they look like, just go to thebigcorp.com resources in Savant, and you can see the videos that have been produced by One Firefly. And in full disclosure, I've talked to you about this, Ron, that now I'm producing some of my own real short videos that I'll be putting on my website, and I used your template as a reference, to say this is how professionals produce these things. And so I sent your videos to my video production guy and said, this is how we should follow the leader here.
I appreciate that. I've seen various manufacturers over the last, we launched that product in 16. So since 16 to the present, I've seen different people around the industry try to emulate or copy the format. And I think, it's the best form of flattery when people consider
it
what
is.
we've done
Yeah,
the standard
absolutely.
and they want to copy it. So I think it's all positive and frankly, similar to maybe Elon Musk's philosophy. He shares his IP with the world. I believe that a rising tide raises all ships. So
I totally agree.
We need to get better as an industry, communicating, not just communicating, but communicating to the customer the value that these technologies bring to their life. And I was going to say the other side of the equation is they also need to just be better, right? So back to Chris's point, there's guys and gals out there just doing a shit job, and they need to, demand a higher level of excellence from themselves and their teammates. And if we communicate more effectively and we grow as an industry, it's a bright future for all of us for many, many years to come.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Chris brought up some really valid points. And I do think that we all have a responsibility to work together to promote the professional CI industry and promote the fact of why consumers should be working with professionals like us. I've devoted 3 decades of my life to this industry, and I know, Ron, you probably are in about the same boat. And I like to give back to the industry. The articles that I write, I don't get any money for it. I don't, obviously, you're not paying me to do this now, and that's all in an effort to give back. And same with the trainings that I conduct, webinars and so forth. That's all. I just want to give back to the industry and help us all grow and become better together. Because going back to my example of those little separate systems around the house, look, there are a time and a place for that. I have a old client of mine that is a physician. He and his wife moved into a temporary house. They're not going to stay there that long. And did it make sense for him to completely rewire that house and they're only going to be there a year or two and retro everything? For him and his lifestyle, probably not. So he put a couple separate systems in, and I recommended that to him. But if someone's building a new house, it really is sad and kind of turns my stomach if they're not wiring for technology in that home, and that's really scary for our industry, because if they're not wiring for technology, they're not putting in wire, they're not putting in speakers, they're not putting in keypads, they're not putting in a home automation or control system or integrating any of that stuff. And so, what happens a year, 5 years, 10 years from now to us in this profession that we've all dedicated our lives to? And I'm not saying that we should all be taking advantage of the consumer and selling them things that they don't need. But I will tell you that wiring for technology in a home absolutely adds value to that house. And if you look at a neighborhood where you have similar priced homes and some are wired with technology and some are not wired with technology, you're not going to convince me that the ones wired with technology don't have value over the ones that are not wired with technology. So we all need to be beating that drum and talking to a consumer audience as well about the value of working with a professional integrator.
So I'm going to close out here with
Okay.
a comment from the one and only Joe Whitaker. He says, "Good point, Pete."
All right. Thanks, Joe.
And he says, "If it can be wired, it should be wired." So
I love it. Awesome.
Awesome, Joe. Well, Pete, it has been a blast having you on episode number 97 of Automation
Lucky number
Unplugged.
97. Yes, thank you. It's been great being here. Thanks a million, Ron. And thank you to the audience as well.
Awesome, Pete. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right. Think big.
Think big. All right, folks, there you have it. The one and only Pete Baker, show number 97, Automation Unplugged. Kind of talked about a lot of fun topics that I'm thinking maybe in the last couple of years of Automation Unplugged, we really haven't delved into that deeper branding and marketing conversation. So that was really neat. If you are watching live, I am gonna just share something with you, and that is that this show is now available as a podcast. So if you are listening on podcast, you obviously already know this. But if you're watching, which is most of our audience has been used to watching us for the last 2.5 years, we've just made the transition. It's been slow and steady, but we've made the transition to where the shows, like for example, this Automation Unplugged number 97, approximately next week, it'll be available in all of your favorite locations to download your podcast. So if that's on your Apple iPhone, there's a purple podcast icon on your phone, and or Stitcher, or all of your favorite places. All you do is search for Automation Unplugged. You'll see the show. Feel free to subscribe, and that way you have all the latest shows dropped in automatically. So definitely be sure to check that out. And on that note, it has been my pleasure to spend an hour with you here. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.